Hello, my fellow readers. It is I, Dark Symphony 777. As always, a link to the story will be in the description. Please like, subscribe to the channel, and remember the fact this is my own opinion. If you have an opinion on your story, leave it in the comments below. Now, on the subject of readings, there's a ton of different types of readings. There's mysteries, there's horrors, there's psychological stuff. And I have no idea where I'm going with this, so I'm just going to cut to the chase. I am reviewing a story based off one of my favorite, if not my favorite, PS3 game of all time, and that is Alice Madness Returns. It's created by, who created it? Crazy Horse? I know the director was American Mcgee, but I forgot what the name of blah blah blah. What was the name of the gaming company? I don't know. Let's see. Electronic Arts. Oh, it was developed by Spicy Horse. And the reason I wanted to specifically do a American Mcgee's Alice story was a little background information. My friend Liz, who actually owns the games on PS3, both the American Mcgee's and Madness Returns, he introduced me to the game because she asked me, said, "Hey, do you like Alice? Have you ever, you know what Alice in Wonderland is, right?" It's like, yeah, I know what Alice in Wonderland is. And so she showed me the games, and I like the games. Well, not really the first game, mainly because the controls were way too stiff for a PS3 controller. I could see it being like for the PC, which it originally was, but it's like, they should have worked on the controls, or probably like remastered. I don't know. But I love the shit out of Madness Returns. I love the psychological aspects of it. I love the characters. I love the scenery. Everything about the games I really love, and especially now that American Mcgee is trying to kickstart a third game in the series, Alice Asylum, as well as trying to get enough money to go to EA and buy the full rights to Alice, so he can make her sort of the mascot of Crazy Horse Gaming, or whatever the full name of that company is. Crazy Horse, I'll just call it that, and do like a bunch more games, maybe a book, maybe a film. I'm pretty much just getting that information from the wiki. Yeah. So I decided, in honor of the fact that my friend literally showed this to me, because I can't wait if Alice Asylum comes out. If it comes out, that's a big if. I decided to review a pair of Alice-related stories. This is the first one. I'm gonna do a reading of another one which is an Alice in Wonderland play called Wonderland. Probably in the next day or two. Yeah, probably tomorrow. And I came across the first story that I saw that was completed, which is the story I'm reviewing today. So the story I'm reviewing today is called Alice Reflections of Madness. It's written by Wile E. Coyote. Yes, I'm reading a story written by a Looney Tune. Hey, you can look it up yourself. It really just says Wile E. Coyote. And so it's not really a novelization, it's more of a retelling. For those of you who don't know what a retelling is kind of has in people's mind is basically just another word for novelization, but it's not true. What a retelling is compared to a novelization is a novelization follows the same beats as the thing it's adapting. When you're adapting something, you want to see something like the same. Like when you think of most adaptations do this. I mean, a retelling and novelizations are both types of adaptations, but a novelization follows the same consecutive beats. So if the story says guy A goes to location X, does Y, and then leaves at Z time, a retelling will go Sir A goes to city B, does something, and then or goes to XY but does a different thing. Let's call it W, and then leaves at Z time Z. So it follows the same plot, but the author does it differently. It gets to the same point as the game was trying to do, but goes about it in a different way, which I guess is not as hard as a novelization, but it's still pretty hard because adaptations in general, I have to say, are pretty hard in general. And this is a retelling of Alice Madness Returns, and I again love the game. So, what's the plot? To figure out what the plot is, we have to figure out. It's basically just the plot of the game. It takes place a year after American McGee's Alice. Alice is at an orphanage under the care of Agnes Bumby, and he's basically doing these therapy sessions on her and trying to erase her memory. Meanwhile, she's lured into Wonderland, and Wonderland's going and breaking apart and falling apart at the seams by this mysterious man, the Doll Maker, and the Infernal Train, being built by the Dormouse and the March Hare. And so she has to journey across Wonderland, figure out how to stop the train, while at the same time trying to figure out what the Doll Maker wants, how to stop him, as well as finding out the truth behind the fire that kind of mentally scarred her years ago. And that's pretty much the plot in a nutshell. However, like I said, how the author does it differently than what with Mr. American McGee did it. How does the author do it? Well, you gotta compare and contrast. In the game, we see like how the characters react to one another, how they react to Alice and the situation around them, and it's usually just really mopey, kind of dystopian. But the tale of... Where was I? Oh no, I skipped ahead a little bit. My bad. And the tale of the game was more of Alice getting revenge. However, what I felt in Reflections of Madness was more a tale of redemption. It has the same plot, Alice wanting to figure out what happened to the fire and stop the Doll Maker and the train from destroying Wonderland, but Alice overcomes her grief in a different way. Instead of letting rage consume her and then petering out, she realizes that in order to progress and become better, she has to let go of the past, and that means having to figure out the truth. Excuse me. In terms of the plot, how the author did it differently than American McGee's, I have to say he actually did it better. He or she did it better, and it was actually a lot more really psychological. If you never played Madness Returns, the game favored a lot of symbolism and a lot of real cryptic imagery and cryptic wordplay. I mean, in order to figure out the lore, everything, you had to find these memories, and they're everywhere. So, however, in the story, it's more psychological, because in the game, Alice, when she's reacting to like situations in the game, it's like she's just reacting to with somewhat ambivalence and nothing like that. But we see her grow as a character as she journeys through London and through Wonderland. And I really, really like that. Honestly, I didn't like it at first, but the story grew on me. It definitely grew on me. And so the differences between the plot and the game are basically minor things. It's how Alice reacts to certain areas, how she reacts to the ruin, how she reacts to everything around her, how she reacts to the Doll Maker, aka Mr. Bumby. Yeah, it's kind of obvious. And to everything around her. It cuts out a lot of stuff. It cuts out half of the Oriental Grove. It cuts out Queensland, except for the conversation with the Queen, which honestly I didn't like, but is the grand scheme of things, it's a nitpick. I know it's a retelling, and I know, you had the Queen, talking to the Queen was the most important part in growing big. Everything's anachronic. She finds the teapot while fighting the March Hare and the Dormouse. She finds the umbrella in the Oriental Grove because honestly, Feels like about the burp. Whew. Sorry about that. And we see Alice's genuine reactions to certain things along the story. Her reactions to how everything works, how everything's different. I really liked what the author did with the characters. Both the ones that were kind of joining and ones that didn't really matter. The Cheshire Cat. He was a bundle of hilarity. I mean, sure, he's not really supposed to be hilarious, but he comes off as hilarious unintentionally in the story. Like in the first part when Alice finds the shrink drink and is able to shrink, Cheshire is like, "Hey, I have something to show you," and then jumps in her arm and is like, "Why are you in my arms?" "Because I'm a cat. I don't like water." Meow. And then leads Alice to the Jabberwock. Different scenes are different. I really like the part in terms of the plot of each character of Wonderland representing a different part of Alice's psyche. If you didn't play American Mcgee's, they already kind of established that with the Jabberwock being the personification of Alice's guilt, and each character in Madness Returns in this story represents a different part of her psychology. The Cheshire Cat represents her conscience, her guiding light. Hatter, self-preservation. The Carpenter. I'm drawing a blank on the Carpenter. I'm like completely forgot what the Carpenter is. What they mentioned it, but I completely forgot about it. The Empress Mantis, who was supposed to be in the game but was dummied out, represents her doubt and her despair. Caterpillar represents her intelligence, and the Queen represents her secrets and everything. And how it goes around. The author does stuff differently from the story, and a lot of that's good. Some of it's the game did it better, but that's just a moment of contention of whether or not you love the game or not. I really, really loved. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. Excuse me. There's the burp. And back to characters. I loved what the author did with the characters and how streamlined they made the story streamlined, because Alice in Wonderland has a lot of everywhere. Like in Hatter's Domain, instead of going to both buildings to fight to get the pieces of the Hatter arms and legs from the Dormouse and the March Hare, it's with the Mad Hatter. She just gotta find them, and the two buildings are combined together while they're building the Infernal Train. How much time have I been on? 13? Okay, that's good. Barrel Bottom. Thank God the author completely decided to skip the part where Alice has to fine tune that whale. I didn't like that part in the game, so thank God. So yeah, the Carpenter, he was a testable dirtbag. Even in the game when I first saw him, it's like, I don't trust you. I don't trust you. I don't trust that walrus either. I don't trust you more. And then I was completely confounded when it turned out the walrus was the worst of the two. The author did kind of miss an opportunity. This is as another nitpick. I've seen Alex I wanted to see Alex hit the walrus upside the head. Come on. Just one hit. I wanted something with that. Alice's reactions to the ruin is phenomenal. Of her finding out their children, which makes sense in the game, despite the fact it's implied in the game that they are children, but we don't really find out their children until we get to the dollhouse. But seeing Alice's reaction on it, the Cheshire I really liked. The Queen of Hearts was probably not the Queen of Hearts, Bumby. I'll get to Bumby in a little bit. Queen of Hearts was, I guess, creative in a way of having her of having the queen actually pretend to have the look of what she looked like in the game, while the face of Lizzie hid inside a mask, which was a nice touch. And finally, the human characters. They acted pretty much the same, with the exception of Dr. Bumby. I have to give the author kudos. I didn't think, when I read this story, it's like, I don't think you can make Dr. Bumby even more detestable. Somehow, some way, the author, he did that. He made Dr. Bumby so detestable, I wanted to punch him in the freaking face. And, it's like, I don't know how. I mean, there's certain things that are really hard to do. This was one of those. I don't think you can make Bumby worse than he already is. And somehow, the author did. Making a original character for the asylum. My train of thought came out to this. Like, I was thinking of going back to my friend's house tomorrow and playing Alice Madness Returns again, because I love that game. Going back to each location, Caterpillar was nice. But the star of the show was Alice. I mean, I can go on and on about Alice. How she reacted to the rune was nice. How she figured out everything out. But the main point is what I liked about Alice that was so different to the version in the game is this version of Alice is much more relatable. She is much more likable because you actually feel sorry for her, with her finding out all these truths, and instead of in the game where she's like, yeah, okay, or pretty much with anger. She feels that she's at fault, and she wants to shoulder the burden, and she wants to fix everything in the story, which it makes her more relatable. And the journey of her from the beginning to the end was phenomenal, especially at the end once he reaches the Oriental Grove, where she really, really grew on me. And she was undoubtedly thirsty, the star of the story. I don't think if the author kept Alice the same, this story wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have. Especially at the end. No, I'll talk about that at the end. I'll talk about it at the end. The ending for the end. Grammar-wise, I didn't see any grammars except for two. One in chapter 4, I believe. What was it, chapter 4? It's either chapter 3 or chapter 4, where Alice actually runs into the Dormouse and she calls him out, and then the story randomly calls Alice Dorothy. So I'm I read that as Alice is not Dorothy. We're not in Oz. We're in Wonderland. I don't know. And then another error at the end where Alice kind of accidentally put Alice where Lorena should be, Alice's sister in the game. Pacing and imagery. This is a very slow burn story. It really needed to be paced, but it's one of those stories that needed to pace itself, but couldn't pace itself too much, because if the author made it any longer, then it would have just been dry. Probably another 10,000 would have been good. But if it paced itself anymore, in I guess 150, because it's 130,000 words long. If the author kind of paced it worded it any longer than I say 145,000, the story would have dragged on way too slow, slowed everything down, and ruined the story. So this is a case of one of those stories that moved at the pace that it needed to move. It didn't move too fast, but it didn't move too slow. Because if it went either way, it would have just collapsed like a train wreck. And before I get to, and that's it with the main part of the review. So now, should I keep talking about the review? Nah, I think I talked about the main part of the story enough. So would I recommend it? Favorite part and final thoughts. First off, would I recommend? This is a hard one because this is a more psychological take on the story, despite the fact, oddly enough, the game itself is heavily psychological. So you have that going against it. There's also the fact it's really, really boring. It's pretty much the same as the game in like the first two areas, the Hatter's Domain and Barrel Bottom, minus Alice fighting the March Hare and Dormouse, because if you actually played the game, they actually get a mech, and then Hatter throws a teacup at him. No, in the story, she actually fights them. But outside of that, it's pretty much the same. So it's like it's a more psychological take on a psychological game. It's very slow at the beginning, and it's nobody outside of a very, very dedicated fan base, which my friend Liz is part of, because she's a really big fan of Alice, and she got me into the games. It's really hard to say, but that second half of the story just completely blew me out. Everything from the start of like the part leading into Oriental Grove, her fight with the Empress Wasp, which honestly forgot to mention her in the character part. She was a good character. I really would love if the author kind of puts her in a sequel, because I would really love to see more of her. The fight with the doll maker, and especially the incredible swerve that she actually brought the Jabberwock back to life to help her fight. I was like, I swear to God, I thought I was thinking she's gonna be able to summon like all the friends from like Wonderland, like the Carpenter and the Walrus and the Mad Hatter and the Caterpillar and the Red Queen, and they're gonna show up. And they're gonna all team up to fight the Ruin. It's like, I'm all psyched about that. Then the author pulls a swerve, like, oh, you can summon the Jabberwock. He's like, what? What? She's gonna summon the what? She's gonna summon the Jabberwock. I did not see that coming. Holy shit. I don't like cursing, and I don't take cursing lightly. So when I do curse, oh, you better believe it's important. I was caught off guard by that. I did not see that coming, especially the part where, the doll maker grabs her and it's like, I got you now, and then he notices the knife in her stomach. It's like, and he pulls it out. It's like, I hope that can be fixed. And then out comes the Jabberwock and kick everyone's ass. There was also kind of funny part in the same scene where like she's about to fight the Ruin, and like she summons a Cheshire, and he's like, what? And she tosses the pepper grinder and it's like what? Why am I? It's like, fire! It's like, fine. Just the image of the Cheshire cat kind of messing around with the pepper grinder is like kind of a hilarious image. I don't know why. It's just having a scene of like a big cat holding a gigantic pepper grinder. It's like something of a hilarious image, and him firing like so back to where I was, which is what I recommended. On one hand, you have an incredibly slow beginning that's really heavy and psychological, that is also very, very the same of the game itself. On the other hand, the second half is completely amazing, and it's one of those stories that I can't, excuse me, that I have incredible trouble saying how good it is. So it's like, should I not recommend it based on how lackluster the first half was, or should I recommend it based on how good the second half was? It's really, really hard to say. So I spent most of today because I was actually supposed to do the video earlier today, but my little brother was in here, and my family makes a habit of making the videos hard to make with all the arguing and yelling and everything. And I was thinking on it, and thinking on it, and thinking on it, and I finally came to a decision. I'm going to actually pick your choice. I'm sorry, but the second half is so good, but this first half is just so meh. I can't choose either way. So I'm going to leave it up to you, the reader. Do you think the story is worth recommending, or do you think the story is not worth recommending? Anyone who watches this video, just go click the link in the description. Read the story yourself and tell me what you think of it. Because I can't decide. Hold on. Probably collect call. Yeah, it's collect call. Collect call. Sorry about that. Favorite part. A lot of parts from the second. But if I had to pick one, it would have to be this version's Alice confronting Bumby. So if you don't know, if you didn't play the actual game, the final cutscene in Alice Madness Returns was Alice confronting Bumby, aka the doll maker, for prostituting children, hypnotizing them to become hollow shells, and raping her little sister Lizzie. And Bumby's like, she wanted it. I offer goods and services, and it goes south in the game with Alice hearing the train and then pushing him into the path of the train and killing him. It's like, and I saw that ending. It's like, that fits, but at the same time, it's not. It's missing something. So when I read this version, because this part's actually cut in half, it's half her confronting Bumsy and the other half in Wonderland destroying the train. She confronts Bumby. This time she actually has a case. She's not going to kill him. She's going to arrest. She has cops with her. She's going to arrest him. And he's still pulling the nonchalant card, saying, "Oh, she deserved it." And then Dr. Wilson. If you don't know who Dr. Wilson, he shows up a little bit in the. He's mentioned in parts of the game with the cops, and he calls the cops and tells them, "Bumby, you're under arrest for raping and prostitution and everything." And then he realizes he lost, and then he pulls a fast one, and he grabs Alice by with the handcuffs, because back in the day in Victorian England, the handcuffs weren't little dinky things here you go. They were huge chains. Okay, there you go. And he wrapped them around her. He pulls her towards the chain. He's like, I'm guessing he's pulling if I'm going down, you're going down with me. And then a white cat comes up, attacks him, and then he nearly falls in it. Almost falls in the train. Alice tries to save him, manages to grab the key, but he still falls and dies by the train. I think that's a more fitting way to handle the whole scene. I think if I could pick any one scene that the author did better than the game, it's just one scene. Everything about it is so much better. The pacing, Bumby finally getting his comeuppance, but at the same time not making it look cheap, because the whole dying in the game felt like that's cheap. I mean, I just felt cheated out when I saw that scene. It's like it's missing something. I mean, it's missing a proper catharsis. And seeing him finally fall, seeing him, everyone kind of revealed how bad he was, because the game didn't mention. It's highly hinted based on the ending that she didn't bother telling anyone how bad Bumby was, but people found out anyway. But this way, it's much more better. It's much more realistic. It's much more likable. It's everything I like in this story wrapped up in one scene. Final thoughts. My final thoughts is this. There are so many directions this story can take. Especially the ending. It ends on something of a sequel hook of Alice seeing a shadowed, kind of a smoky wolf, with smoke wafting off, showing up in Wonderland because she fixed Wonderland, and she's carrying her niece, and apparently it's based on a couple of sentences. It's possible that Wonderland isn't as confined to her mind as she thought, which I guess kind of fits what happened at the end of the game, sort of, but this one does it better because it's her fixing Wonderland now. And there's so many ways the author can do it. I mean, he can easily go back and do his interpretation of American Mcgee's. I would actually love to see what he would do with American Mcgee's version, the first game. He could also do Asylum if that ever makes it out, or maybe he can put his own touch on it. He can go on the wiki and find out like the little like information what's supposed to be happening, and like see what he does with that in case the game goes south and the game doesn't come out. He can also do other lands. He said at the end, at the author's note at the end, he might be doing other lands as his next Alice project. And then there's the wolf and her niece. That begs two questions. What's going to happen? What is the deal with the wolf? And more importantly, does her niece actually see Wonderland? I mean, kind of makes sense. Maybe it's due to the fact Alice is holding her niece, or maybe, again, Wonderland is not as confined in her head as she thought it is. And that's actually a pretty creative idea. Like, the whole idea that Wonderland is, despite something that she could see, is not actually a figment of her imagination. It's actually starting to breach into her world and, combine with it. So that's actually a cool idea. The author can go that route of Wonderland slowly crossing over into the real world and people actually seeing all the stuff that Alice has been seeing. Because that would actually be a cool idea, like Alice's family interacting with the Cheshire Cat and the Mad Hatter. You can make a story. I mean, the author can actually do something involving the Red Queen and have the Queen's like little journey through Wonderland, trying to fix slowly actually trying to help Alice fix the Wonderland with the Cheshire Cat. It could be like a little small story. But what I think, and this is what I think, the author is going to do as the big sequel, Alice Liddell going into other fairy tales. Imagine that. Wonderland breaching into stories like the Three Little Pigs, the Little Red Riding Hood, which what I'm guessing isn't what the wolf is. It's the wolf from Red Riding Hood. Little Miss Tuffet. But just that idea, that's like a hell of a hook that I really want to see come true. I really hope the author kind of takes it in any direction, but I really honestly want to see more of Alice. I really want to see this version of Alice more. I'm probably not going to see it if the author does the retelling of American Mcgee's, because then he would also have to fit it into what's going on in this story, because that would technically be a prequel to Reflections of Madness. But overall, I cannot wait for the author to make however he wants to progress, whether it's by prequel, whether it's by sequel, whether it's by side story with my idea with the Red Queen and Cheshire kind of fixing up Wonderland and restoring, kind of helping her restore everything, or maybe Cheshire and the Mad Hatter, or a story about the inhabitants of Wonderland after the events of Reflections of Madness. There's so many routes the author can take that it's mind-boggling. But I'm still leaning on either other lands or the fairy tale idea, because those seems the most plausible. And that's my review. I mean, this is one of those stories, honestly, that I couldn't fully describe. I mean, if I fully described it would probably, how long have I been doing this video? Oh, come on, load. 34 minutes. I would actually, if it wasn't for the fact that, I would have trouble wording it out, I can easily stretch this review in like 45 minutes. But that's my review. That's my take on the review. There was so much that I really wanted to talk about, but I didn't want to. Mainly because it would be this story. If I did, the story would be like very spoiler heavy, and I want to try and leave out spoilers. Keyword try, and that's my take on Reflections of Madness. If tell me what you think of the story in the description. If you like the story, let me know. If you hate the story, let me know. So it is, and if you have another story you want me to review or do a reading of, please leave it in the comments, or email me at my fanfiction profile, fanfiction.net/user/darksymphony777. This has been DS777, my loyal readers, and